Hey, what's going on YouTube? Today's video is going to cover a PowerShell onboarding script for those new employees that come into the organization. So what that means is that instead of having to open up the Active Directory tools and then creating a new user, assigning the groups to that new user and the various properties that go with that, we could go ahead and automate that process by running a PowerShell script, entering a few keys, entering their name, maybe clicking yes or no, and then the new user will be created. So with that being said, let's get started. Alright, before we get started, I would like to ask those that enjoy the videos that I have been putting out there to drop a comment, leave a like, subscribe, show some support. It helps me knowing that I am helping you. But let's get to it. Alright, so the first thing that we want to take care of is we want to pretty much set up the environment that we are going to be placing these users in. So in another video in the past, I did set up these Active Directory DNS and all that, so you can check that out. But for today's video, I already have that installed. So first we want to open up the users. Actually, we'll pull it up down here. Users and computers, Active Directory tool. The first thing that we want to do is create a OU, an organizational unit. We'll open that up, and then we're going to right click, and then we're going to go down to new. Go over to the right, organizational unit. So we're just going to name this org1. You can leave this, we'll just leave this unchecked just in case for the lab. I'll just delete it later. We'll do the same thing, go back in, new. We're going to make two organizational units. We're going to name that org2. And then from there, inside of those organizational units, we want to create a group. So again, right click and go to new, and we'll say group. And we'll just say for this, we'll just say group 1. Nothing crazy. Leave these default. Do the same thing here. Name that group 2. So essentially, for those that are not too familiar with this, the organizational unit, the OUs, is what we could apply our GPOs, the group policy objects, to. And then obviously the groups is what members could belong to. So that is essentially what we're going to do. The PowerShell script is going to ask us what organization, or in maybe in your case, what office this user belongs to, or however you split up your organization would determine what you would put here or how you would define that. But the script is going to ask you what it belongs to, and then based on that, it is going to take a template and it's going to assign that template to that specific organization. So let's go ahead and create that template now. We'll make two templates. So we're going to go back in here, and then we're going to create a new user. We're just going to say template, and then we'll just specify a user logon name there. Specify a password. Leave everything else. We will disable it because obviously we do not want this account enabled, potentially in a real world environment where someone could log in and use those credentials to perform some malicious act. Let's go ahead and we'll just copy that, and now we will do template 2. Same thing down here. Ooh. Alright, so next we will go ahead and I should rename this template. We can just change it all, change that. Alright, there we go. So now that we have our template created, we want to go ahead and just assign some basic properties to those templates. So for template 1, let's go ahead and say description. This will actually be altered with our PowerShell script, which I'll explain in a little bit. Let's go ahead and put another one here. We'll just say office 1 1 2 3 4 5 6. Very basic stuff here, just to kind of give you guys an understanding of what you can do with this. But this is going to be the template for one user, and the other one will be the same for the other user. The other thing that we want to highlight here is member of. So we just created that group, right? So we're going to assign this template 1 to org1 to check names. Sorry, I think I misspelled that. So let's go ahead. Maybe it's org1. What's going on here? Oh, I'm crazy. It's group 1. Sorry. I'll go back in there. Properties, member of, add, group 1. Check name. It's verified. Apply. We'll do the same thing for template 2. You see that it's here. Apply that. We'll go back into the account tab or general tab. Change a few things here. I can't even spell. Whatever. Does not matter. Office 2. Alright, so now we have our 2 templates. We have our OUs, the organizational units. We have the groups inside of those. And that's it for the first step. Alright, so for the next step, we are actually going to develop this script, the PowerShell script. So to do that, we are going to use the ISE, Windows PowerShell ISE. We're going to right click, run that as administrator, because we need those powers in order to create a user. So this is essentially PowerShell, but it is used for scripting purposes, because we can go ahead and write the script at the top, and then we could also run through it and then make our changes as necessary as we go on. Alright, so the first thing that we want to do is we're going to create a time span. This doesn't need to be now, but it's just the way I did it. So we're going to put a note for that. We're going to say create time span. So this time span using the, well, first let's assign a variable. So variables are assigned with that. And then let's go ahead and, sorry, I was thinking about this commandlet as I was saying. So the new time span is the commandlet that we're going to use, so new time span, and then we're going to specify the amount of days that we want to pretty much add to the current date, which we will define in a little bit. Yeah, so that's it for now. So the next thing that we want to do is we are going to ask the user or the administrator that is running the script exactly what organization this new user will belong to. So let's go ahead and make a comment for that and describe that. So ask user for unit, or we'll say ask unit for org. This could be office as well, unit, whatever the case may be. Let's create another variable, and we'll just say org list, and then we'll do org1, and I guess we'll just do org2. Alright, and then we want to get the input from the user, so let's go ahead and say org, and then we'll use the read host commandlet, and then from there this will read the input that it will ask the user for input, and then it will assign it to the org variable. And then here we will say please enter office, and then in parentheses we will say exactly what we're looking for, so the user understands the format that we're looking for. Alright, that's good there. So now let's go ahead and just verify. So at this point, if the user enters the wrong organization or types, maybe makes a typo, we want to make sure that is determined here and that the program does not continue onward. So let's go ahead and say we'll just say input validation of office name, and then we'll say if. So this is an if statement, a conditional statement, that if org, we're going to use in, and then we'll say org list, and then we want to clear host. This commandlet will just clear the screen. So at this point, if the organization does exist, we're going to clear the screen, and then it's going to continue with the next prompt. But after that, let's define if unit does not exist. So let's say he enters org3, for instance. We want something else to happen. So unit does not exist, exit program. this is just being descriptive, so in the future if we came back to it and made some changes, we understand what we're looking for, we could find it fairly quickly. So now we're going to define else. So if is not true, if the if statement above is not true, then we want to do something else, and that's where we will write office, we'll just say office does not exist, and then we could just go ahead and if we wanted to do like a start sleep commandlet, I believe that's commandlet, and then we'll just say 10 seconds. So this way this prompt is on there for 10 seconds, and the user could sit there in shame, understanding that he made a mistake. Alright, so at this point we've asked the user or the administrator for what organization this user belongs to. We determined that if it is correct, we are clearing the screen. If it is not correct, if he entered an office that does not exist, then the program will exit. I need to put exit. Alright, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and now let's get the user information. So this is what the administrator is going to be putting in for this new user. So we will define the first name by using fname. Again, this could be anything you want, whatever is more descriptive to you and makes more sense to you, go ahead and use that. So again, we're going to use the read host, and we're going to say please enter first name. We'll do the same thing for last name. Please enter last name. And then now that we have the first name and last name, the way that my organization has set up the username, and it is quite common in other organizations, is that they will assign it to first at last. So whatever the username will be, the first name will be the first half, and then obviously the last name would be the second half after the period. So we'll go ahead. I use S name. Later on, we're going to define the SAM account name, so I just kind of named it here S name. Really, again, this could be whatever you would like, and we are going to pretty much alter or combine the two, I should say, that we had just defined. So we're going to say F name, then we want to do a plus sign, pretty much like append, and then we will do that again. Then we'll say L name, last name, and then we will, the D name is going to be for the display name, and then this time we're just going to do a space, no period this time. Alright, so after displaying the S name and the display name, let's go ahead. Now the UPN is another one, is the user principal name. It's just going to be the S name, and then we are going to assign the domain. So we're going to go ahead and do @cyberme.local. So this is specific to your domain, depending on what you have. Obviously, if you went to local server, you could determine your domain right here. So cyberme.local. This was set up in the first video. I do not know if this particular environment was the same, because I might have changed it since then. But this is described in another video if you were to scroll back a few months ago. Alright, so now we have the UPN. Next, let's go ahead and define today's date, which will be used for the description. So T date, and then we're going to use the get date commandlet. We're going to specify a format, if I could spell, and this format will be for year, month, to day. And then lastly, for the user information, we want to get the account expiration, or we want to set it, I should say. We'll define that variable. So we're going to again use the get date, and then we want to add that to the original tspan variable that we had defined at the very beginning. So this is getting today's date, and then it is assigning 365 days to that date. And then down here below, we will go ahead and say that is the expiration date. So after this point, this count is no longer valid, and it is therefore expired. Alright, so next we are going to actually create our users based on the input that is provided by the user and the template that we had created earlier. So let's go ahead and define that comment here. If I could get into my virtual machine, there we go. So we're going to say copy user template based on input. So again, we're going to use an if statement, and then we're going to say if this is going to be org. We're going to use org. Make this a little bit, yeah, whatever. We're going to say if org, and then we want to use to lower. So we want to, just in case if the administrator for whatever reason enters all capitals or all lowers, it takes that input and makes it all lower, and then we're going to compare that to using EQ and compare that to org1. Alright, so now that we have that, here we'll just put org1. Alright, so the next variable that we want to define, we're going to say u for user, and then we want to get the, pretty much at this point we want to get the template that we had created for organization 1. We'll go ahead and use the get AD user commandlet, and then we'll specify the identity. So this is how we want to find that template based on its identity, and we already know it's template 1, but if we open it up we could verify. There we go, it's template 1. Make sure that is correct spelling, otherwise you will run into some troubles. And then here we want to specify what properties we want to grab. So we're going to say description, office phone, and that's fine for now, just getting the point across. And the next thing that we want to do is go ahead and we want to get the groups that template is assigned to. So we're going to say get user groups from template. Make another variable, call that ugroups equals, and then we're going to use this commandlet at get AD or principal group membership. Again, we're going to specify the identity, and then we're going to use template 1. Now at this point we had grabbed the groups and all the properties that we want from that template, and now we're actually going to create that user. So let's go ahead and say create user, and then here we're going to use the new AD user. We want to specify the SAM account name, and we're going to assign that to S name like we defined earlier. Then we want to set, actually we could do this first, let's do instance, and then we want to specify the U. The instance is pretty much what is using that template as for this new AD user. That's how you assign it, that template, to this user. And then we'll assign the SAM account name to S name, user principal to UPN. This could go on. We could do surname, and we'll say L name. Given name is going to be F name. Name is going to be D name for display name. Next, we want to go ahead and grab that or define that description. And here we are going to say reviewed. Then we'll add a plus sign, and we're going to say T date. So here is where we are saying that we reviewed this account or created this account. Here we'll say created. We created this account on this date that we defined earlier with the T date variable. And then lastly, we want to set that account expiration date, set that to the ACC expire. Alright, so now that we had pretty much created that user using the new 80 user, the last thing that we want to do is we want to give the user group. So we grabbed them earlier, now we want to assign them. In order to do that, we're going to use uGroups, and then for each of those groups inside of there, which we're going to use for each, and then specify the add group membership again. We're going to use the identity again. And then this time we're going to use member of, which is a parameter of 80 principal group membership, and then we are going to use this guy, which is pretty much saying that we want to use the variable inside of this pipeline. So this guy for each, and then lastly we want to go ahead and say this is not necessary, but sometimes depending on if you are creating a user or assigning a group to a user that he already belongs to, or modifying a user, you want to go ahead and use this. So it will, because it will give you an error and it will stop, whereas if it's something that is not detrimental to creating this user, we'll just go ahead and silently continue. Alright, so that is all we need for the first user. So I'm just going to go ahead, probably zoom back in. So I'm just going to go ahead and just finish the second half. You guys don't need to see it. It's the same thing as for template 2, and I will do that now. And there we go. When you do that, make sure that you change everything so the org2 is no longer org1. I hope you guys could see this. I ended up zooming in after realizing that maybe it wasn't as visible as I thought, so hopefully this is better. But like I was saying, make sure you change the org1 to org2, and also change the template 1 to template 2 in both of these sections, and I think that should be it. Alright, so everything looks good. Let's go ahead and continue onward. We are towards the end of this script. So now at this point we want to verify that the user has been created, or verify the results. This is not what I wanted. I wanted to create a comment. So let's go ahead and clear host, and then we're going to say write host, and we're going to say account. So the write host, I don't think we've used that yet. Maybe no, we did not. It is just pretty much going to write some text to the screen for the user to understand, maybe a specific thing that's going on, whatever you want. So we're going to say user created for, and then we will specify sname here. Again, we'll do write host, and then we will say properties, and then we will get 80 user identity sname, and we want to show all the properties that are assigned. Next, we want to make sure that we enable this account. If we do not enable it, it will create this account and leave it disabled. Also, maybe we want to leave it disabled, so we are going to give that option to the administrator. So here we're going to say user enable. We'll say read host again, so we're going to read the input from the user or from the administrator asking, would you like to enable account for sname? And then we'll kind of specify what we're looking for here. Alright, and then we're going to use an if statement again. It's a conditional statement. We're going to ask him if user enable do the to lower equals y, then do this. And here we want to say set AD, that is not what I wanted, AD account password, and then we want to use the reset parameter, and that will give us the option to set that password. Write host enabled Now we were telling him that we had enabled the account. Let's go ahead and actually enable it with the enable AD account. Identity, this name. Now if that administrator for whatever reason wanted to leave that account disabled, let's go ahead and define that here. So we'll say keep, and then we'll use an L or else if. Also, I forgot to mention that up here. When I copy that, we got to make sure we use an else if statement for that. And then we will say else, where am I? Else if user enable the lower equals no, and do this. I'm going to say right host disabled. And then last but not least, we are just going to do one more form of input validation, and here we'll just say else. So if this guy puts a Z instead of a Y or an N, let's go ahead and say that he needs help. He needs to go see some help because he doesn't understand how to comprehend this information. So we're going to say get help. Hopefully he gets help. Give him some time to comprehend this by assigning a timer of 5 seconds so he can stare at it, and then we will exit this program. Alright, so that should be it. I'm sure we will find an error or two depending on how many typos I have. So let's go ahead and save this. We'll just save it to our downloads. Say create user.ps1. You don't even need to say that. Create user. Let's see what happens. So please enter office. So here we could put org1, caps, no caps, should not matter. Here let's go ahead and put cyber me. Looks like we're getting there. It says, would you like to enable account? So at this point right here above this is displaying the properties of this account, again, which is what we had defined or asked to be printed right here. So get AD user, identity, properties all. This is not needed. I just find it necessary so you can see exactly maybe if you ran into any errors instead of having to open it up and look for yourself. So that's really it. You could look at the member of, well, it just went down. So if you want to verify that the user was placed in the right group without having to go verify in the interface, the GUI interface, you could look here, member of. You can see the OU belongs to org1, and then the group 1. That's pretty much it. We didn't define too much, but I will also show you that in a minute. Do you want to enable the account? We're going to say yes. Let's go ahead and set that password. I totally just botched that password. Let's go ahead and set it again. And there we go. And the account has been enabled. So let's run that one more time. Let's do it for one. Let's make a mistake here. Office does not exist. It is going to run the sleep that we had defined earlier for what, 10 seconds. Go ahead and just stop that. We get it. Run it again. We'll do org2 this time, all lowercase. Enter first name, YouTube. Again, it's got the same thing. Would you like to enable the account? Let's say no. Maybe we don't right now. Account is disabled, and that's it. So at this point, we had onboarded 2 employees. We had a organizational or org1 employee, and we have an org2 employee. So let's go ahead and just pull up their the Active Directory users and computers tool. Refresh. As you can see, we have YouTube and we have CyberMe, the 2 users that we had created. Right here in the description, you can notice the date, which was defined in that script based on the today's date. And then if we go in here, we could see that the member of group 1. Same thing if we go into YouTube, and group 2. And that's really it. What I did notice is that this didn't carry over, so let me take a look real quick why group 1 didn't carry this over. So give me 1 second. Didn't take very long. I just realized that I did not define any of that in the template. So the only thing that is going to take obviously would be the, where are we? Would be this is what we defined, but everything else that we did not define in the template will not be provided. But that's it. So let's go ahead and just log in just to show you that this in fact works. So I'll go ahead, log out of this account, and we'll log in with cyber.me. Alright, so I pulled up the Windows 10 client. So I had to join to the domain. I guess I didn't have it joined to the domain anymore. So let's go ahead and log in. I think it was cyber.me. Alright, as you can see, it is now logging into that machine with the account that we just created using that PowerShell script, and that is it. That is all that is needed in order to automate that process and make your life easier during this onboarding process. Alright, so I'm going to close out the video here, at least for the onboarding process. There will be another video next week that will cover maybe an offboarding process and a few other PowerShell scripts throughout the month, so stay tuned for that. And as always, never stop learning.